Welcome to Re-Review, where we watch movies from our past with a perspective from today. Your hosts are Matt, Bobby, and Austin, and we love the films from our youth, so we're taking a look back to see if they still hold up. This is episode 2 of Nic Cage Month, where we've selected one Nic Cage movie each to watch and a random Nic Cage movie for the 4th. Today we're discussing National Treasure. It was released in 2004, directed by John Turteltaub, starring Nic Cage, Diane Kruger, and Justin Bartha. This movie walks us through a thrilling adventure of a history buff / treasure hunter trying to protect the Declaration of Independence. Now, this is a fair warning. We're spoiling an 18-year-old movie, so if you haven't seen it, we will be revealing key plot points. What can I say about National Treasure? Wow. So I picked this one because I definitely was looking for what I felt was a classic Nic Cage film, something that in my head, because it really has been, I don't think I've seen it since it was released, such a long time, thinking this was one of those core Nic Cage movies. Like, we've got to watch National Treasure. And I'll tell you right now, for me, I'm kind of gonna lead here saying it didn't really disappoint me. I actually was really from the get-go was pulled into the story that they were presenting. Now ultimately this is like a big mix of heist movie, Indiana Jones shenanigans, but you know, once it opened and you have the sort of that Princess Bride moment of having the old grandfather tell the story to the kid and take you with the throwback, I was kind of bought in immediately in terms of just what I was going to go with the story. So give me your brief something here. Bobby, tell me how you felt about it.
I agree with you. I really like the American history, colonial era swing to it. So I mean, this is a movie that I think I like it because it feels familiar to me. It feels like Indiana Jones and other kind of adventure style movies that I really like, but it's not like a knockoff kind of parody of it. I feel like it stands on its own, but it just kind of feels like, you know, adventuresome and exciting and wholesome and all those kind of movies that I enjoy. And I don't recall too many U.S. history kind of adventure capers, so I really like that aspect to it.
Yeah, it's when you put it in those terms, it's kind of like, wait, did I learn this in school, or is this movie teaching me this right now? It's a little bit of what's fact or fiction here. Matt, how did you feel about it?
No, I totally agree. I think that, you know, to me, this movie is kind of what I considered prime Nic Cage. This is like the pinnacle of Nic Cage. And I think maybe this might have been one of the last movies before I think we started getting into the near straight to DVD Nic Cage.
Yeah.
Not to say that's a bad thing or anything, but I feel like
Correct.
this was kind of like the pinnacle of, like, you know, seeing him in like things like, you know, The Rock and everything else that kind of, you know, was between, you know, the mid 90s to about now. So he had about a 10-year period where I felt like you had like that Nic Cage where he was leading man, you know, prime leading man, like people who are, you know, really looking for him. And I feel like this role very easily could have been, because, you know, the first thing I think I wrote down when we started watching this was, it was kind of harking to what Bobby said, I wrote down as a smart man's Indiana Jones, where it was, I think, a little bit more careful and considerate of history than I think what you got in Indiana Jones, where I feel like they're kind of vague on some things in those movies. I mean, obviously some later movies even more so, but I think that it gave I don't want to say a history lesson, because I'm sure some history buff watched this movie and like, oh, no, wrong, all wrong. But I think, you know, Nic Cage has been, could have very easily have been a boring character in this movie, because I don't think he had the quote unquote charisma and sex appeal as an Indiana Jones.
I was going to say, is it because it's Nick? You think?
I think it's Nic Cage that I think it filled the gap that was there. I would be very interested to know what was on the script and what he brought to the screen. I think there's probably some stuff in there that raised the character to the next level and made it a more interesting character. And I think that kind of helped push the story. Like, the story stands well on its own, I think, where you could have got a competent actor into this role and it probably would have done well. But I think Nic Cage being in it did push it to that level that made National Treasure what it is.
I really bought that he loves history. I mean, I believed it in his line delivery.
Well, I think you're getting into the looking at his actual acting in the film. I have to agree. There's an element of sometimes, I guess, being surprised by Nick, especially because the Nick we know now is a straight to DVD version. So I kind of think of that, and then I see this, and I go, "Oh, yeah, this is actually." I got lost in not necessarily noticing so much that I was watching Nic Cage, even though we totally were, but just buying into the story and everything that they're telling us. So. As they presented the story and it rolled out, it sounds like we all enjoyed it. I thought the pacing was great, but I know there's things that as it went along, we're kind of going, well, why did they set this up like this? Or why did they do that? And if we look at his relationship as Ben and Ian and that first little tiff that they get into, they find this amazing ship called the Charlotte in all this snow. And this story is built around clues. It's find, next quest, find the next clue and go look for the next thing that you have to find. And so they end up getting into a tiff because they realize they need to steal the Declaration of Independence. It seems like a weird point that they could have probably worked together on.
I mean, considering what the end result was, I think that, it kind of made it in hindsight. They should have just teamed up. And this was kind of the thing that I don't know if this movie did a good job at or not. Maybe like hearing your guys' opinion on it. I think I brought it up when we were talking. It's like, I don't know if they really conveyed that Ian was a bad guy in this. Like I said, I don't think I really got his motivations outside of greed, but to be honest, that's not really all too different than Riley in a way. Riley just kind of wanted the money. And even by the end of it, he seemed like he was still more interested in the money. I mean, I'm sure the fun of it and everything else kind of played into it, but it still was about the money. So Ian wasn't all that different in that regard. So like, I don't know if they really established him as a bad guy.
Yeah, they told us by just having him actually literally say, I kind of did some bad stuff in my past. And then his henchman comes up, oh yeah, you got to believe him when he says that.
Yeah. And
well, it seemed like his thing was that he was willing to go further than the good guys, right? Like he was willing to bring the guns and use them and break the law and do various other things.
They only tased the security guard though, so he didn't go that far. And maybe this is something that I think, can't remember if it was you, Bobby, brought it up at the very beginning. It's a Disney movie. Mm-hmm. And so I think maybe that's what it was like, yeah, they had the guns, because I think at the end of the day, Jerry Bruckheimer's involved and like, we can't not have guns. But no one was ever really hurt in this. No one, a guard got tased, and that was basically.
Well, the guy broke through the stairs, and that was the big like moment.
That was gravity. That was gravity and termites, my friend. Okay.
There was a lot of shooting. They definitely missed a lot, and they were trying very, very hard to kill Nic Cage.
Yes. So yeah, I guess going back to the original question about, the partnership between the two of them, I feel like it didn't make much sense in hindsight because they ended up doing the same thing regardless. I do think that it was the moral argument. I feel like they probably could have done a bit better job as to the split on the Charlotte as to why they did it. Like, it wasn't the act of stealing, because obviously Ben Franklin, whatever his last name was, I can't remember what it is now. Gates was, had no problem stealing it. It was just about doing it the right way. And I feel like maybe if they would have did a little bit better job of doing that during the argument, I feel like that would have made me feel a little bit better.
But I also get the feeling it was about like what they would have done with the treasure once they found it, right? Like it really seemed like it was the whole like, this belongs in a museum, Indiana Jones thing, where Ben Gates really wanted to share it with the world, and you get the idea that Ian would have been like, oh yeah, let's just sell this to the highest bidder.
But we don't know that at the beginning, right? Because we get introduced to them in the snowy patch. We learn that the character Ian has basically funded this by him saying, no one else believed in you, but I did. And his first offer is to say we should try to examine the document. And it's Ben who's like, oh, that'll be impossible. So then he goes, well, I guess I'm gonna have to steal it.
True. And I mean, that's kind of the, maybe, and again, I feel like Ian could have been a bit better fleshed out as a character. Him just being like the flip side of a Ben, right? Yeah. He is the traditional treasure hunter in that sense. Because I get the feeling that even if he wasn't going to sell stuff on the black market, the finder's fee being 10%, I'm sure he probably would have been happy with that. Because if it was $10 billion they estimated, which I'm sure probably was worth even more than that in theory, 10% of that, I think they all could have split that and lived pretty happily.
Yeah, but I think that they didn't think that the guy was going to be content with splitting a small percentage of it.
Were you happy with how they brought in Diane Kruger as Abigail Chase, how they kind of tied her in and brought her into the shenanigans with her and the other character, Riley?
Yes. Well, no. I like how they introduced the character. I like how they justified her coming along at the initial. I don't know if I really bought her becoming part of the crew. I don't even in the situation they're in, I don't think that somebody in her position would have put lemon juice on the back of the Declaration of Independence.
No,
I don't buy that.
Well, does it go back to the fact that, like what we were talking about a minute ago, how she saw that he loves history and he's not just trying to steal things for the money. He actually knows his stuff, and he knew about the coins, and he had one, and
therefore she falls in love.
Oh no. Yeah. That was one of my notes. It's like, oh, why did it have to go that direction?
Because they do this in Nic Cage films, right?
I know. At least
movies like this.
I mean, I guess at least it was better developed than Gone in 60 Seconds, I guess.
Yeah.
As far as what we saw on screen.
It. And how did you feel about Riley, Bobby? The tech guru.
Yeah, I thought he was really funny. I mean, he was clearly like just one of the like comic relief / like, you know, like get things done kind of guy. Like, hey, help us get to the next step. But I thought he was really good. And I mean, I enjoyed him. I thought he had some really good lines, and I think he added to it.
I would totally agree. I think that's the, which is, it's kind of weird when you think about it in a way, because like usually you have the straight man and the funny man, right? Dynamic. And it's hard to think that Nic Cage is supposed to be the straight man in this scenario. Nic Cage of all people.
Right.
I think that, Riley was well placed. I think that he did get some of the better lines in it. I think that Justin's delivery was well done. I think that there's only probably a couple other actors I could have seen in that role and deliver it as well as he did.
I think one of the reasons it did work for me is it wasn't like so overtly like, hey, here's the comedy guy, you know, like get like a comedian, like, hey, here's the over the top, like, hey, this is the funny guy.
I just imagine Kevin Hart.
Right, that
totally.
type of guy, like kind of like a bombastic slapstick kind of guy. I really like that it was kind of believable that he could have been like, you know, like actually what they said he was, like
the tech guy.
A tech guy. And then just a guy who like went along with him and went after everything and just was part of the team, and not like, okay, here's just a guy that's here only for comedy.
Now, I don't really remember, is it the same cast that went into the second film as well? Or was that only Nic Cage at that point?
No, it was these core 3 or 4 characters.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think maybe even the FBI agent might have been a little bit in the sequel. Maybe.
Oh,
Harvey Keitel?
Harvey Keitel. Yeah, he was good.
I think he might have been it, but I think the main, Riley and, the main little group was in the sequel.
Well, let's talk about Harvey. Let's talk about Sadusky. So was he supposed to be a Templar or something?
Yeah.
Were they hinting at that?
Yeah, he's one of the Illuminati or whatever they're the guiding thing. That was kind of the thing that I was kind of thrown off about, was the fact that you had the last surviving founding father who was a Templar, because that was the whole basis of this, right? Was he had to tell the stagecoach driver, who was Gates's grandfather's grandfather's grandfather or whatever, the story. They never really said why he was going to talk to Andrew Jackson about it or whatever. I'm guessing he was going to pass the story along, but there's clearly still Masons in the modern era. You'd think that it would have just been passed on within the group. So Andrew Jackson was a Mason too. I don't know about the history of it, but Like why? Like I don't really get the reason why it was told to the stagecoach kid. I know the story had to happen. I get
Was
it.
it because he was on his deathbed and he was about to die? And
But there were still Masons, clearly, because it's continuing to the modern day. So, like, why would you why talk to the president about it? And why not just keep it within the group? Because I don't know,
No, the president wasn't there and he was like imminently about to die, right?
But
So
why?
he had
But
to
why
pass it
talk
on
to the president?
somebody.
That's my thing. Why tell the president? There were other Masons who were alive. Was Andrew Jackson the last Mason besides this dude? Was the premise, and so he had to tell him.
He was the most important one, probably.
But
See,
then
that's
that all, I guess what I felt too, and we're definitely jumping to the end here of them finding this treasure. It seemed like the Sadusky character was almost like, oh, I actually knew the treasure was down there already because I'm the protector of it. Did anyone else get that vibe?
He definitely wasn't surprised.
Yeah,
for sure.
that's what I was gonna say. He was not surprised at all about the
Which seemed
treasure,
really,
but-
really weird for me. And the whole entire time, and I think Bobby you mentioned this, but I was having flashbacks of other movies and I could not tell if I was thinking Indiana Jones or what else was going on in my head. I was actually surprised they found the treasure. I did not expect that. I was,
Really?
because I feel like in movies like this, you don't get that big payoff. Like, wait, it's supposed to be this difficult thing, and this is why you have a sequel, because they don't actually find
The
stuff,
treasure
and
was
they
friendship.
Yeah, I could totally see the end of the movie where they have a clue and they're like, "Oh, this is it. This is the clue that's going to lead us there," and then fade to black, and that's the next one.
Yeah, that's what I was just very surprised, because I was like, wait, not only did they find the treasure, then he tells the truth about all of it to the FBI agent, and then it wraps up so nicely with, oh yeah, I guess we are just going to split up the collection amongst all the museums across the world. Yay. So that does feel a bit like the reward was friendship, but they did get money, I guess. So that part's kind of good. I do want to talk about some of the action. When was the last time you saw like a good food truck chase scene? I was kind of into it.
Short Circuit, I guess.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're totally right. Good 15 years before, but yeah.
I mean, I would say like I do think that this very much. I think Bobby might have brought it up. It felt like a Jerry Bruckheimer movie, and I think the action was the clue to that.
Mm-hmm.
Was just the way that the action takes place, the chase takes place, the aspect, because I feel like that's what really sells a action sequence from other action, because I feel like anyone can do an action sequence, but the ones that usually sell is the unusual element. And in this one, it's, you have a truck like that where one, you have the contents of the truck. So you have things rattling around, and then you have the fact that, okay, well, you can open up the truck. And so now you can go in and out, and like you have people hanging off doors. And so it gives that X factor, as opposed to, okay, well, they're just in the back of a U-Haul van, right? Like you have that extra little spice to it.
What about the actual stealing of the Declaration?
Like the
We had
heist?
two teams doing two very different tasks to try to accomplish the same goal, with, Nic Cage eventually being shot at again. Did you find it believable?
I mean, I already called out the technology behind it. I'm pretty sure that those cables for the video signal for security were shielded. I don't feel like you could just clamp onto those and get a video signal out of it. I mean, okay, so I guess that this is going to go into something that I was going to ask later on, but it ties into the negative aspect of this movie. If I had to have a negative about it, it's the clue onto the clue leads to the clue. It's a series of dominoes or Jenga, right? Like if you remove one element of it, everything else falls apart as a result. Right. And so it's like, okay, and I brought it up when we were watching the little chemical that he puts on the coin. She didn't wash her hands between then and when she went to go drink the thing. And so like a lot of the aspects were a little bit too fantastical for me. I love the pacing of it. I love the feel of it, but the actual logistics behind it and the realism was kind of lost on me. I feel like Ian's method, a lot more realistic. And I could see just brute force it. I would like to think that they had thought of that. Like maybe we should reinforce some stuff and not just have the simple fan, It was, at least in, The Rock, there was a fire pit you had to roll through.
Bobby, how'd you feel about it?
I thought that it got to where there was a lot of clues, just going from one to the other. And I thought that they would solve the crime and then, or solve the puzzle, but then they had to have the Ian's group keep solving it too. And then, to keep them on the trail, instead of just like, okay, like, let's follow them. They had to like solve the clue and pay attention to where they were going. And at times you just like, like Google, Yahoo, search it, or, find other ways around it, or solve the puzzle with just the last word of Stowe and all that kind of stuff. So I
have to agree there. The clue pacing, again, it kept the movie moving, but we do have the point where even he admits on camera saying, could it really be this easy? And he takes out the pipe to unlock the door that leads to the treasure. They kept giving it to us and feeding it. I do want to mention
the pipe.
The pipe, yeah.
That was the thing. Because, okay, I get a lot of these clues. The pipe was one that bothered me the most. Not the latter part of it, but it's the thing that started the whole thing. The one clue that they received was the secret lies with Charlotte or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's a pipe. Somebody could have just removed it from the ship at any point, and that secret would have been a moot point. And this ship was in the middle of, what was it, like Canada or something? Like it was like Maine. It was like up there.
Shape, yeah.
It was like it was right next to Captain America. Like it was like frozen in a tundra. And
all I'm hearing is you wanted the 5-minute version of this film where they couldn't find it and it was movie over.
I get it. I totally understand the plot needs to happen, but I feel like most of the rest of the stuff, for the most part, was the Declaration of Independence is a highly protected thing. They mentioned in there. That's why they put it on there. The glasses were in a brick thing. Aside from the building getting torn down, they're going to be there. Like a lot of the stuff. The only one that really bugged me, I guess, more than anything else, was the $100 bill and the time. That was designed by some guy. Like no one was paying that much attention. But I guess that's the influence of the Mason Templars, right? Like they're like, draw this clock on there.
But doesn't it make you want to do it for your own life? Like just leave clues around. And maybe in 200 years, someone's going to be like, what is this?
No, that's how if I ever got rich, that's how my inheritance is going. I'm making a series of clues.
Well, that's the whole like time capsule idea, like some people put like a newspaper in their attic and then.
But it's more fun if it's like a chase. And you don't tell people how to solve it.
You do it and then you hire an Ian group to do it as well. That way, like you're racing against the clock.
You mentioned Yahoo, the tech portion, it's always funny to think about, especially now with how ubiquitous cell phones are in our lives, and looking at this film where they did most of their stuff without using phones, which was kind of nice to see and refreshing. But once they got onto Yahoo, wow, did it feel really old.
Sponsored, sponsor alert.
I'm pretty sure this was sponsored by Visa from the looks of it.
Oh yeah, that's a good point too.
And it was only Visa.
Should use the Visa.
Well, that was also a way for the FBI to track them.
Yeah, I do think that. Well, it could have been American Express too, but I do think that this film didn't suffer the way I think a lot of other ones from the 90s and 2000s have with the integration of technology. I think that even I had brought it up, like the OS for Riley's computer.
Oh, yes.
For tapping into the security system was super, like, someone definitely did that in Photoshop type stuff. I don't think that I ever was thrown off by it. I think the Yahoo was probably the most egregious use of the technology. I think for the most part, they kind of stayed away from it, which I think was good. Yeah. I don't think there was any pagers in this, right? I think this was post-pager technology.
Yeah.
So
they had flip phones.
Yeah, at least it was a Nokia, I guess. But man, that would have been even better if Ben didn't have the Declaration of Independence. If he would have brought up a Nokia and they shot the Nokia and that protected them as they're shooting at him.
Well, like you said, if the phone tech was there, heck, you could probably read the back with the special ink now with the cell phones we have today. He just needed to advance into the future just a little bit. It looks like they're going to make another one. Is this real?
I honestly vote that they should. I'm surprised that it's taken this long because I don't remember when the sequel came out, but I feel like it was within like 2 or 3 years of this one. And that was, we'll say 2007. It's 2022. And, it's surprising it's taken this long, but I don't know if maybe it was just, I do think that the clues, and I kind of mentioned it being a negative before, kind of felt tired in the sequel. Because again, it's a clue to a clue to a clue to a clue.
Yeah.
And so eventually you just kind of get a little bit tired of it, that you just keep going in this weird chase that happens. I also think that I know Bobby kind of mentioned it was kind of an interesting aspect to this movie. It's the US portion of it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel it kind of limits you in a way. Like I feel like this one perfectly balanced in the way because it's very tied into the origins of the US, and I feel like that's kind of like the time period that I feel like you could do something like this because we're not it's not an old country. We don't have
right.
You look
It's
at
only-
Indiana Jones, everything else is outside of the US.
It's only 200 plus years of history, really. It's not like.
And this era, that it was like this era and like Civil War is kind of like the ones I feel like you could really do anything with. And I feel like maybe even the sequel might have, it was the Civil War, right? Because like they threatened that his like grandfather or whatever was like a conspirator to kill.
They
Oh,
mentioned
don't spoil it. Don't
revolutionary.
spoil it.
You haven't
Don't
seen
spoil
it? You
I'm not remembering.
Okay,
This is
okay.
why, I kind of want to watch the second one now after watching this one.
This is the first 5 minutes. So there,
They
I'm
mentioned
not.
the Revolutionary War in the beginning of the movie. This movie.
Well, so I mean, that's about as much history as you have to really work with. So
Yeah.
if they do a next one, I kind of hope it's not in the U.S. I know it's called National Treasure, but I would like to see it kind of expanding beyond that. Maybe, I don't know, Mexico or something. Like you can revolve around
Treasure?
the
Yeah,
International
that's good.
Treasure.
International Treasure. You heard it here first. Let's go to the question I always ask near the end. Bobby, are you recommending this movie?
Absolutely. I thought it was great fun. I mean, I enjoyed watching it. I think that, if you're looking for a good time where you don't have to think too much, then I think it's great. All the thinking is done for you, and you can come away with some facts like that. Time changes was made and was
World War One.
invented in World War One. Yeah. So.
It's the big bane of our existence. Matt, are you recommending this movie?
Oh yeah. I think that this is a good movie to watch. I would borderline question again if they did all the fact checking. There should be in a history class potentially. Like, I don't know. You've all had those days, right, where your teacher's like, "I don't want to teach today," so like they have
Put
movie
on a
day.
movie.
Yeah, there you go. You just throw a National Treasure, and they learn something about Ben Franklin and glasses and everything else, and just hope that they don't start going down the rabbit hole of Illuminati and everything else. So
It does
Yeah.
make me want to learn more about Masons, that's for sure. Freemasons, I should say.
don't
There's
go
probably
too
ways
deep into
to find
that.
out about that.
If you go too deep into it, man, this is going to become the Matt and Austin show, and Bobby's going to never be seen again.
I have to echo this. I definitely think it's worth watching again today. I feel like it really fits the vibe of like that perfect popcorn flick. You could throw it on and it'll be entertaining. So it's definitely all of our recommendations to pick this one up again if you haven't seen it in a while. If you just haven't seen it, I think it's a great Nic Cage starter film to get into because again, this was peak Nic Cage. So as always, we thank you for listening, and remember, cooperation only lasts as long as the status quo is unchanged.